Have you ever looked back on a moment and thought, I let my emotions get the best of me? Maybe it was a conversation that turned into a fight, a decision made in anger or fear, a relationship that slipped through your fingers, not because you didn't care, but because something inside you reacted before you could truly respond. We've all been there. At this stage of life, it's not about having all the answers. It's about learning to listen, not just to others, but to ourselves. Emotional intelligence isn't just a buzzword. It's a quiet compass that helps you navigate the messy, beautiful complexity of being human. It's not about suppressing feelings or pretending to be tough. It's about understanding what's happening inside, so you can move through life with more grace, more clarity, and more peace. When you learn how to recognize what triggers you, when you learn to pause before you speak, when you begin to see others, not as enemies, but as mirrors, something begins to shift. In this video, we'll explore 10 simple yet powerful practices that can help you tune in, slow down, and show up for yourself and for the people who matter most. No hacks, no hype, just real tools for real life, for anyone who's ready to respond to the world with less chaos and more calm. 1. Understanding your emotions. Ever felt something rise inside you and couldn't quite name it? Not anger, not sadness, just something heavy sitting there, making decisions harder, conversations colder. It happens more than we like to admit, because most of us were never taught how to sit with our feelings, only how to hide them or rush past them. Over time, I've realized understanding your emotions isn't about fixing them. It's about listening, really listening to what your inner world is trying to say. Not every reaction comes from this moment. Sometimes it's an echo from a wound you thought was long gone. Sometimes it's not the words someone said, but what those words reminded you of. I remember getting unusually upset over a simple email. Nothing rude, but something about it felt disrespectful. And as I sat with it later, I realized it wasn't about the email. It was about years of feeling dismissed, unseen, unheard. And that day, it hit the same nerve. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And when our emotions go unexplored, they color everything, quietly, persistently, and often unfairly. What's helped me? Writing. Even just 5 minutes a day. Not to sound wise, but to be honest. Meditation too. The kind that isn't about clearing the mind, but about letting the mind speak without judgment. And when I can, I ask myself, what am I really feeling and why? That question alone has softened many storms. The truth is, the more we understand what's moving inside us, the less likely we are to let it move through others in ways we regret. Because sometimes, emotional intelligence starts not with mastery, but with humility. The kind that says, I don't have to fix this yet. I just need to feel it fully. And that changes everything. 2. Practicing mindfulness. Ever noticed how fast everything moves these days? The noise, the news, the endless thoughts. It's like the world never pauses, and neither do we. But somewhere along the way, I started craving something quieter. Not silence around me, but silence within me. Over time, I learned something simple and life-changing. You don't have to believe every thought you think. You don't have to follow every emotion that rises. You can just notice them. Let them pass through, like clouds in a sky that doesn't mind the weather. I remember sitting in traffic one day, late for something important, watching anger climb up my spine. But then something told me, just breathe, just notice. And I did. I felt the tension, the heat in my chest. But I didn't let it drive the car. That small pause, it changed everything. Mindfulness isn't about being calm all the time. It's about noticing what's happening before it becomes who you are in the moment. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Concentrate every minute on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness." To me, that's mindfulness. Noticing, accepting, responding, instead of reacting. You don't need to sit on a mountain or light incense. Mindfulness can happen while you're washing dishes, drinking coffee, even listening to someone fully. It's the practice of being present, without judgment, without fixing, just being here. And the more you practice, the more space you'll feel between what life throws at you and how you choose to catch it. That space, that pause, that's where peace lives. And sometimes, peace is simply choosing to notice instead of react. 3. Practice empathy. Ever had someone talk to you, but you could tell they weren't really listening? They heard your words, but not your heart. And maybe, if we're honest, we've done the same. Nodding through the conversation, waiting for our turn to speak, while missing the moment that mattered most. Over time, I've come to see empathy isn't about fixing anyone. It's about making space for their experience, without rushing in to rewrite it. I remember a night when someone I loved sat across from me, quiet, withdrawn, and I kept asking, "What's wrong? What do you need?" But what they really needed was just for me to sit there, fully present, no answers, no advice, just with them. Empathy is not about knowing what to say. It's about being willing to feel, even when the feeling isn't ours. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Whenever you are about to find fault with someone, ask yourself, what fault of mine most nearly resembles the one I am about to criticize?" That line humbled me. It reminded me that true understanding starts with humility, with realizing that we don't know, but we're here anyway. So how do we practice empathy? We start by really listening, with our ears, with our eyes, with our full attention, not to judge, not to correct, but to understand. Ask, "How is your day?" And then truly wait for the answer. Watch their eyes, notice their silence. And when they speak, don't plan your response. Just stay with them. Because in the end, people don't always need solutions. They just need to know they're not carrying it alone. And sometimes, the most healing words we can offer are the ones we don't say. Just our presence, just our care. That's empathy. 4. The power of pause. Ever caught yourself saying something and immediately wished you hadn't? It happens fast. The words come out, sharper than you meant, colder than you feel, and suddenly, something small becomes something big. I've been there more times than I'd like to admit, and I've learned it's not the emotion that causes the damage. It's the reaction that follows, without thought. Over time, I've started doing something simple. Not easy, but simple. I pause, just for a few seconds, just long enough to catch myself before I let the moment take over. I remember once, I got a text that hit a nerve. Everything in me wanted to respond right away, defend, correct, prove my point, but instead, I waited. I put the phone down. I walked outside, breathed, and when I came back to it, I saw it differently. That's the power of the pause. It gives you room to choose who you want to be instead of being swept up in who you used to be. Epictetus said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That quote, it doesn't ask us to suppress emotion. It asks us to respond with intention. The pause isn't silence, it's space. Space between impulse and integrity, between heat and clarity. And the older I get, the more I value that space. So next time something stings or presses your buttons, don't answer right away. Don't act right away. Just stop, breathe. Let the moment pass through you before you pass anything on to someone else. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. 5. Effective communication. Ever said exactly what you meant and still got misunderstood? You spoke with clarity, but what they heard was something else entirely. That's the thing about communication. It's not just about words, it's about tone, timing, energy, intent, and most of all, it's about connection. The older I get, the more I realize. Being right means nothing if the other person doesn't feel seen. We don't communicate just to inform. We communicate to understand and to be understood. I remember a time I was trying to explain something important to someone I love. I had it all laid out, clear, logical, but it didn't land. Not because of what I said, but how I said it. There was tension in my voice, a sharpness I didn't hear, but they felt. And in that moment, clarity got lost in defensiveness. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change, for I seek the truth." That's what real communication is about. Not proving, but seeking, together. So how do we communicate better? We slow down. We listen to truly hear. We speak to connect, not to control. We pause before we assume. We ask questions without already having the answer in our heads. And when it's our turn to speak, we choose words that are honest but also kind. Not sugar-coated, but never cruel. Because at the end of the day, it's not about having the last word. It's about building something stronger than any single sentence. Mutual respect, shared understanding, the quiet bridge between two different hearts that choose to meet in the middle. That's communication. Not just what we say, but how we make the other person feel when we say it. 6. Managing stress proactively. Stress doesn't always show up loud. Sometimes it's just a tight jaw, a short fuse, a heavy silence after a long day. We carry more than we say. Deadlines, bills, aging parents, grown kids who still need you in ways they don't admit. And sometimes life just stacks up until you're not even sure what's weighing you down anymore. But here's something I've learned. Stress doesn't have to run the show. We can meet it early instead of waiting for it to break us down. I remember waking up one morning already exhausted. Nothing dramatic had happened, but it was all there. Emails, worries, the ache in my shoulders I'd ignored for days. So I sat still and I breathed. Slow, intentional, one breath at a time, and in that space, I felt something shift. Not because the problems disappeared, but because I did something about how I was carrying them. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And that's the heart of it, isn't it? We can't control everything, but we can choose how we meet the day. So maybe it's 5 minutes of quiet in the morning, a walk before the world gets loud, stretching, breathing, letting the weight soften, even a little. Stress won't vanish overnight, but when we face it with care, when we move our bodies, breathe with intention, and remember what is in our control, we reclaim something powerful, our presence, our perspective, our peace. And some days, that's more than enough. 7. Cultivating positive relationships. Some people make you feel lighter just by being around. Others, you walk away from them feeling drained, even if they didn't say much. At this point in life, I care less about how many people are around me, and more about how I feel when I leave the room. Positive relationships aren't loud or flashy. They're steady, supportive, quietly life-giving. But here's the truth no one tells you. Good relationships don't just happen. They're built. One moment of empathy at a time, one honest conversation, one boundary spoken with love. I remember a friend who called me late one night, not to fix anything, not to vent, just to ask, "Are you okay?" He didn't rush me. He didn't judge. He just stayed. That one call, it reminded me what connection feels like when it's rooted in care, not convenience. Seneca once said, "One of the most beautiful qualities of true friendship is to understand and to be understood." That kind of friendship doesn't demand perfection, but it does ask for presence, patience, mutual respect. So how do we build that? We listen fully. We show up, even when it's not convenient. We speak with honesty and kindness, and we set boundaries, not to push people away, but to protect what matters most. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors, and the right people will always knock instead of breaking through. The older I get, the more I realize I don't need a crowd. I need depth, people who lift each other, who stay when things get messy, who remind you of who you are when you forget for a moment. Those are the relationships worth nurturing, slowly, gently, every single day. 8. Emotional agility. Not every feeling needs to be fixed. Not every emotion needs to be solved. Some just need to be felt fully and then released. But that's not what most of us were taught. We were taught to be strong, to shake it off, to push through, and sometimes that works, until it doesn't. There comes a point when pretending we're fine starts costing more than it protects. That's where emotional agility comes in. Not controlling emotions, not avoiding them, but moving with them, not against them. I remember a time I felt this wave of frustration. Nothing huge had happened, but something small, a comment, stuck. The old version of me would have snapped, or buried it, or turned it into something it wasn't, but this time, I paused. I asked myself, where is this really coming from? And more importantly, what matters more, being right or staying aligned with who I want to be? That shift from reacting on impulse to responding with intention, that's emotional agility. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And every time we choose to respond from values, not emotion, we reclaim our power. So next time a feeling rises, anger, shame, fear, sadness, don't push it away. Don't become it either. Just notice it, name it, let it breathe. And then ask, what do I want this to lead to? Because emotions are not the enemy. They're messengers, signals. And when we learn to listen, without letting them drive the wheel, We stay grounded, open, true. That's not weakness, that's strength with soul. 9. Learning from emotional experiences. Some feelings don't just visit, they leave a mark. You think you've moved on, but the echo shows up later, in a conversation, in a reaction, in the way you pull back, without knowing why. But here's the thing, every emotion carries a message. Not always comfortable, not always easy, but always worth listening to. Over the years, I've stopped asking, why am I feeling this again? And started asking, what is this trying to teach me? That one shift from judgment to curiosity changed everything. I remember walking out of a meeting years ago, tight chest, clenched jaw, telling myself I was just tired. But later that night, I sat with it. I asked myself, what really happened in there? And I realized it wasn't about the meeting. It was about feeling dismissed. Again, that reflection. It helped me show up differently the next time. Not harder, not colder, but clearer. More aware of what I bring into the room. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Our hardest emotions, they're not roadblocks. They're invitations to grow, to understand, to do it differently next time. So when a strong emotion rises, don't rush to bury it. And don't explode either. Sit with it. Ask questions. What triggered this? What old story is being replayed? What do I want to carry forward? And what can I leave behind? Because emotional maturity doesn't come from never feeling. It comes from learning each time we do. And every emotional scar we've earned, it holds a lesson if we're willing to listen. 10. Cultivating curiosity over judgment. Judgment is fast. It feels certain, clean, simple, but curiosity asks us to pause, to open, to look again, even when we think we already know. I've learned when we lead with judgment, we stop listening. To others, to ourselves, we see what we expect, not what's truly there. But curiosity, that's where growth lives. I remember snapping at someone once, thinking I knew exactly what their tone meant. Assumed the worst, defended myself. Later that night, I realized I never actually asked them what they meant. I filled in the blanks with my own story, and it wasn't even true. That moment stuck with me because it reminded me assumptions aren't facts. They're guesses, usually shaped by old wounds. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone is mistaken, instruct them kindly and show them their error. But if you cannot, blame yourself or no one." It's not about letting things slide. It's about seeing deeper before we decide what's true. So the next time a feeling rises, confusion, anger, defensiveness, pause. Ask, what else could be going on here? What am I not seeing? What's this emotion really trying to tell me? And when someone else is struggling, instead of labeling them, get curious. What pain are they carrying? What story are they stuck inside? We don't need all the answers, just better questions. Because curiosity creates connection, judgment creates distance, and the older I get, the more I crave connection, even when it's imperfect. Especially when it's imperfect. So let's practice asking instead of assuming, exploring instead of concluding. Because when we stay curious, we stay open to others and to ourselves. Emotional intelligence isn't a destination. It's a lifelong journey, quiet, personal, and deeply rewarding. You don't wake up one day finished. You keep learning, keep listening, keep showing up with a little more grace than yesterday. Some days will feel messy. Some moments will pull you off center. That's okay. What matters is that you keep coming back to what grounds you. What matters. What's real. So if this video spoke to you, even just a little, share it with someone you care about. A friend, a partner, someone walking through their own emotional storms. And if you're ready to keep growing, not alone, but as part of a community that values reflection, connection, and calm, we'd love to have you here. Subscribe, join the conversation, and share your story in the comments. Because the more we learn from each other, the more we create space for understanding, for compassion, for the kind of strength that doesn't need to shout, just shows up, softly, steadily, every day.